Okay, so just welcome. We have absolutely no idea who is out there in the virtual world, but we believe you are there, and we know that this can be recorded, so you can pass this recording on to your friends. So I just want to just say a big, big thank you, first of all, to North Atlantic Books for really believing in this book and believing in this anthology, African Wisdom. And yeah, New Voices talk black liberation, Buddhism, and beyond. And of course, this book would not be possible without the contributors. And I think that's just really important to say, because often, I was the editor. I didn't write the book. Okay, the contributors wrote the book. We wrote the book together. And I'm very fortunate today to be in the eminent company of Rima Vesley Fled, yeah, who is a scholar in Buddhism and many other things. But I do really want to point to that. A scholar, I think it's so important to have BIPOC scholars in the arena of Buddhism. And just to say that this book is more than Buddhism, it reaches beyond that, black liberation and beyond. Yeah. And so we have Carla Jackson Brewer, who is a Buddhist teacher, a senior Buddhist teacher. And again, it's really important that we have BIPOC Dharma teachers. And I want to say that Carla isn't a new BIPOC Dharma teacher, because there's a whole lot of new BIPOC Dharma teachers coming through. Yeah, yeah. And Carla has been around for a long while and has got a lot of wisdom. And then we have Arisika Zarak, who would say it's Buddhist. I have the who is a healer in many ways, a healer through voice, a healer through movement, and I have the great pleasure of working with Arisika on an offering that we offer once a month called African Wisdom and Healing. And so we thought what we would do is we would just go into a conversation about African wisdom. So what is what is African wisdom?
So I want to start off because speaking of African wisdom, I just want to invite us for a moment to maybe put a hand over our heart and just acknowledge our ancestors, the ones who support us. Part of African wisdom is understanding that we are here because of those who have gone before. We stand on the shoulders of those who loved and inspired us, those we may not know, those we know. And so I just want to call in the ancestors, the supportive, loving ancestors, and also wherever you are, to acknowledge the indigenous inhabitants of the land that you're walking on, resting on, rolling on, sitting on.
Ashe.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Yeah. And just kind of riffing off that, Arisika, when we call in our ancestors, that it's not just our bio ancestors that we're calling in, we're calling in our affinity ancestors. And I love what Louisa Tish says, that actually, many of us have white ancestors, and some of those ancestors we may be calling in, or we may have to quarantine them as teachers. We may just have to put them into quarantine until we're ready to be with them. So, ashe, ashe, ashe. Okay. Rima, I see you moving forward.
Yeah, Vimalasara and Arisika, both of you are inspiring me to also lift up our Buddhist lineages and to acknowledge our Asian ancestors who brought the teachings to us. And last night I was listening to a talk by two teachers who are teachers I've studied with and have known of for many, many years. And both of them talked about the importance of locating ourselves within Buddhism, or maybe not, but still acknowledging, especially in this broader sphere where we talk about mindfulness, kind of glib terms sometimes, that actually these teachings do come from Asia, from many different countries, and we benefit in such direct ways, and to lift up those ancestors very explicitly as well.
Yeah, thank you for saying that Rima, because definitely, you know, when we think of these teachings, the Buddhist teachings, and how have these Buddhist teachings impacted us today? And I always say, like, the oldest therapy program that we know is Buddhism. Okay, the oldest recovery program that we know comes from the Buddhist teachings. So, you know, they're out in the world, that people are benefiting from these teachings. And I just want to come back to something about where we locate it, because, you know, for me, I locate it in the sense that we have Shakyamuni, who rediscovered the way. Okay, so for me, when somebody rediscovers the way, we know that there was a way before. Okay, and we also know in Buddhism, don't we, say that when the Dharma dies out, another Buddha will arise, and we have absolutely no idea. But with this present Buddha came from India and took the teachings out into the world. And also, what I want to say is because that first, how do you feel about the first section? I remember you, Arisika, saying, wow, you start with the first section in the book, reappropriating the Buddha. So how does that stand with you when we have this conversation?
So I wanted to say the first chapter in the book talks about the African roots of the historic Buddhism, or the presence of melanated people of African descent in India, and how far back that goes. And you know, when we talk of humanity, I think it's been, as a scholar in a field called women's spirituality, um, it was so common to just not have Africa on the map. And so it's really important to bring the wisdom of African descended people. And if in fact Africa is the mother of humanity, if all modern peoples, and I make room for the truths of my indigenous relatives, some of who do not accept the out of Africa hypothesis because they feel it's just another way to say that they don't belong to the lands they live on. They believe their lands were given by Creator. But looking at the out of Africa hypothesis, that if all humans come from there, then all these ways come from there. And certainly Buddhism may be one of the oldest therapeutic processes, but as I write in my chapter, embodied creative healing traditions are what have enabled human beings to survive floods, devastation, grief. When the volcano erupted and 3/4 of the village died, we moaned together. We grieved together. We created rituals. The Zantwasi, the diminutive people of southern Africa, who are said to be the Sand people, our oldest human, the oldest DNA comes from them. They have a ritual of somewhere between every 9, 12 days, they do a ceremony where they dance together, and they live in the Kalahari Desert. And so it's very important to have peaceable relations, to not steal from one another. This is a place that's so arid that the water in the stomachs of animals is valuable. And they have a healing ceremony in which dance, shamanic trance, singing, music, and dance come together. And this is one of the strongest heritages of Africa. We know that we heal our trauma through movement, through ritual, through ceremony, through movement. And that is true to this day. So I'm going to leave room for someone else to come, and I'll just come back and say a little more about that.
You know, you asked the question, what is African wisdom? And it made me think about worldview. How do we view the world? How do we work with the divine or work with source, right? So in Buddhism, no theology necessarily, and yet there is the ground of being, right? From which all phenomena arises. And I was really hooked early on in terms of the resonance of the expression of Vajrayana Buddhism and African ritual expressions, right? The process of working with the senses, and so when I think of African wisdom, there's like this richness, there's this, and because it has been denied so much, they attempt to snuff it out. And then it's like, well, look, how do you think these people have survived? How do you think we've, the beauty that's been created, the way to see the world, the antidotes for illness, for egotistical behavior, for, the ways where humans can sort of go off the path. And then these rituals that bring us on the path, the process of singing, like sound practice, the chanting. And I keep seeing these, the roots of Africa, the not just the resonance, and then the mother traditions, the great mother, the tantric system, looking at the continuity. And I'm like, yeah, like looking at the continuity and expression and the evidence of this process of informing, right? Where cultures or groups of folks inform and then in some ways transform the expression. So this African wisdom is dope, and it just is.
Rima, any thoughts on this?
Well, I want to expand this understanding of African to the term indigenous, and to have us think maybe in more interconnected ways. And what's coming to mind especially is a chapter I wrote in this forthcoming book, which is coming out in February, Black Buddhists and the Black Radical Tradition. And really this chapter is about ancestors and also about how so many Black Buddhist teachers have been influenced by indigenous traditions, especially through Australia. And it happens in two ways. So one is there's a teaching called Dadiri, which is known as deep listening. And it's this sense of quiet and being deeply connected to the natural world. And I do hear that resonance in other parts of especially on the continent of Africa. I don't want to say nations because I'm not thinking of nation states and artificial borders as much as peoples and communities, and how that concept and that practice of deep listening is so integral to different African communities and how they practice continuity and solidarity with the land and with creatures. And that is named and conceptualized so explicitly in Australian Indigenous communities. And then also there is this practice of healing intergenerational trauma, and that has come out of working especially in Indigenous communities in Australia. And that practice of healing Indigenous peoples whose ancestors are Indigenous, that practice of healing trauma, it takes into account not just our connection to the natural world or each other, but also how systems of domination have impacted us. So there, to me, seems to be an organic wisdom that comes from Indigenous communities, including African communities, that is both very resonant and present and also indicting. I think there's a kind of critical lens that's clarifying that is important if we're going to take into account how Buddhism is commercialized or commodified in the West.
I mean, it's interesting that you speak to Australia. In my first incarnation, I actually worked as an international correspondent covering Aboriginal deaths in custody and Aboriginal land rights out in Australia. And I had the privilege to live traditionally. And it was just the elders who spoke English, and so I said very little. But one of the things they said to me, there were two things they said to me. The first thing was, "Oh, you're pale black." Like, I'd never been called pale before in my life, so do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I'm pale, all right. And the second thing they asked me, where was I indigenous to? Now, you know, I was like 24, 25, and in England, you just don't think of indigenous, and it sent me on a whole journey, because they were really aware, like, where was I indigenous to? I couldn't answer that question. And today I answer that question by saying that I'm a stateless indigenous person. You know, being in a diaspora, being enslaved, my people enslaved, I've lost, you know, I'm just stateless. I've lost the place of indigeneity, which is why we talk about the Sankofa. Go back and return, and, you know, and pick up what, you know, which we left behind. We didn't even have the choice to leave stuff behind. We couldn't take anything. We were just taken. You know, our colonization is just so different. You know, we weren't colonized on our lands. We were taken, dropped into another land, and lost everything. And with, you know, where do we find that wisdom? And it brings me back to the prince. You know, he was the prince when he sat and said, "I will not move from this spot until I find an end of suffering." Not enlightenment, find an end of suffering. And where did that wisdom come from? It didn't come from a book. It didn't come from some great Asian teacher. It came from within his inner experience. And that is why we have survived as Africans. You know, as Carla was saying, like, we have so much wisdom, we have survived, and that wisdom comes from our inner experience. Where else does it come from? You can't buy this. Oh, you're muted, Arisika.
So I want to just pause for a minute and just feel that wisdom from you. For me, I resonate with the Buddha sitting under the tree and touching the earth that is all our mothers. There's a proverb, I don't know from what African cultural peoples it's from, but goodness, but it says that earth is the mother at whose breast we suck always. Mm-hmm. And we think of the nurturing powers of the earth. In some parts of Africa, the strongest oaths are sworn on the earth. The earth is where the bones of the ancestors sleep. Mm-hmm. And for all indigenous people, they are tied to lands. They may roam, there may be a summer place, there may be a winter place, there may be sacred mountains, certain features of a landscape. There may be a tree under which the Council of Elders sits. There may be rivers, there are seasons. As indigenous, we come from people who were indigenous to their land. And it is a miracle that our traditions of enlivening the body through music and dance, bringing in the sacred. In African tradition, drums and bells, in West African tradition, among the Yoruba descended people, there is this tradition of, we call spirit into our body. We embody spirit. We call spirit in. And at the first, I think in 1977, one of my friends went to the first, international festac, Africans of the diaspora and Africans. And one of the things he said to me, Orisika, the priest of Shango from Africa handled fire, and the priest of Shango from the diaspora, from the USA, handled fire. We know that this body is semi-permanent, is permeable to spirit. That's one of our wisdoms. We have not lost that. We have gone back and fetched it. We lost some things, but we have gone back and fetched it.
Thank you. Carla.
I was just going to springboard because you made me think about deity practice in Vajrayana Buddhism, right? Where we actually sound the seed syllable and we become the deity. right? We manifest as Tara. You can't do that without having that energy. Start working on your body. Start working on your energy. You know, you're not the same after practice than you were before. And not only do you manifest as this energy, you embody this energy, but then you repeat sacred syllables, right? And visualize them moving swiftly out into the world, touching the minds, the heart minds of beings, allowing them to awaken to their true nature. So there's this embodiment and this sound practice that is protective and transformative. So again, you know, the other thing I just want to say briefly is when the Buddha touched, he was challenged. Like, who's here? Mara says, yeah, man. Who's going to witness this? And he says, the earth is my witness. He touches the ground, and the goddess of the earth comes up and meets him. So that profound expression, right? The great mother, like, I got you, right? Nobody can challenge you. I got you. It's just so beautiful and so rich, and is so connected to many of us who are, you know, in the diaspora, who identify as African peoples, even if we are without a state, right? You know, there's that connection. And there's our DNA, you know, energetically, what's going on there? So I'll just leave that question hanging out there.
Okay, so what we're going to do, this is just really exciting. I'm just aware that a couple of you need to be leaving quite soon. So I'm going to play a short video, and then Rima and I will have a conversation. So when you need to leave, just let us know. Oops.
I am Africa, a galaxy of 54 countries, 9 territories, 2 disputed states, orating dialects of 3,000 overtures. I am language literate, language articulate, laughing, drumming, dancing, singing, a cappella voices telling my story. I am Africa.
My name is Valerie Mason-John, aka Vimalasara, and I am the editor of Afrikan Wisdom, New Voices Talk, Black Liberation, Buddhism and Beyond. The book covers Buddhism, and beyond Buddhism it covers Christianity, it covers Islam, it covers Rastafarianism, it covers the life of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, it covers work taking the Buddhist teachings into the prisons, it covers topics of social justice, there's a whole section on decolonizing mindfulness, Black liberation, looking at Black Lives Matter. I chose to focus on the scattering of Africa in the US, Canada and England because I'm firstly connected to all those 3 countries. I was raised in England, I lived in the US, and I now live in Canada. And secondly, I really see that this book is the beginning of a volume, a whole series of books looking at the African wisdom in the diaspora.
I am Africa, polished by the sub-Saharan sun, blue-black, brown-black, red-black, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, swimming in my jeans, swinging in my hips.
And for me, it was really important not necessarily to reach out to established writers or established authors, but to reach out to people who perhaps were established in these certain topics that I wanted to cover. All the contributors are of African descent. And the reason why this book, Afrikan Wisdom, is because in the diaspora, we're often bombarded with many wisdom teachings, but they are often appropriated, actually. And many of these wisdom teachings that we know of actually do come from African traditions. There is so much wisdom in Africa, and wisdom that isn't privy to the foreigner, isn't privy to the white Western world.
Ashe. Ashe.
In Africa, Africans do not have to think, where do they come from? They know where they come from. It's only when they step into the diaspora that they become something different. They become a color. It's a gift from the 34 contributors, a gift from myself as an editor, bringing all those contributors together. And what I want you to know is that the royalties from this book will be donated to an organization that focuses on the uplift of African descent people. Go out there. This book is available from all good bookstores and of course online.
I am Africa, the mother of all peoples, the mother of all nations, birthing the first humanoid, civilizing the first society, robbed of my riches, compensated with poverty, infant mortality, war, famine. I am Africa. What is there left to take? Africa? Africa? You can never take Africa. Africa is the spirit always roaming in my continent. I am Africa, 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 Africa.
Okay.
That video always makes me so happy, Vimalasara. Thank you.
Yeah, I had fun doing that. Yeah. Okay. I just see something in there. Can we? Do you want to end with doing a land acknowledgement?
I can stay a little longer. I can stay till 11:30.
Okay, you can. Okay, so let's kind of dig into some of the chapters that you've written. Carla, let's dig into your chapter, which is specifically on Vajrayana Buddhism. Yeah, what is it that you would like your readers to get from your chapter?
I wrote this chapter in many ways because I do see Buddhism as a way, as a road towards liberation in the relative realm, everyday life, and also, hopefully in the absolute realm. And I began looking at certain Vajrayana practices. I am initiated and also have practiced the Chud practice for about since 1989. And that particular practice employs elements of what we might call shamanism and Buddhism, and this ultimate act of the practitioner to first confront one's fear, get to the edge and push through, which is often referred to as dulshuk, vanquishing conduct, right? But really it is the process of getting to your edge and slipping to the other side, right? And the practitioner offers up their body to nourish all beings. And of course, there's a process where you shoot your consciousness out, etc. But this, when I learned the practice and as I began to be able to do it, I could see what a profound act of generosity, right? That I will, every time I practice, without holding back, offer whatever is needed in the form of my physical form, transforming into nectar that satisfies all these different classes of beings. And in doing that, what am I confronting? I'm actually confronting my fear, my own fear of death, my own fear of being no more, my own fear of harm. And Machik Lobdron, who was the 11th century woman who really developed these practices in Tibet. So Buddhism actually originating in Tibet, which some people, Buddhism came from India. And she was even challenged by Indian pundits who came. It's like, who's this woman who's talking about this stuff, right? And she teaches, like, really for us to recognize our true nature. So in the absolute realm, emptiness awareness, phenomena is empty of inherent substance. So the question that keeps coming up, then why am I afraid? What am I afraid of, right? So this practice works with fear. It also is a traditional healing practice. And so I had an experience working with a relative of mine who was at a particular crisis, pivotal point in their lives. And I just said, well, can I do the chit practice for you? And the person was like, yeah, sure, okay. It's very noisy. It's done with a drum and a bell, and you're chanting and singing. I did the practice. And the next day, this person made a choice that actually transformed and supported their lives. They dove into their own personal healing. And so that kind of energy. So my connection to that and really finding, I call them like technologies, to be able to address how we're suffering, right? Another practice is mandala practice, working with the 5 particular encumbered emotions and the 5 wisdom, and actually being able to transform the muck and mire, right? To move from anger to clarity, that pristine clarity. To move from pride, which really is like poverty mentality, to equanimity. To move from craving to discernment. And the one that's up for me really now, to move from, envy, it's envy and competition, but it always manifests as busyness, so much to do, so little time, task list, into all accomplishing wisdom. It's already accomplished. Stop stressing. To move from spaciness to spaciousness. And through meditation, through sound practice, through working with the senses. So my chapter talks about Vajrayana Buddhism and then provides these examples of how people of African descent can use this technology, can use this wisdom to transform our lives, to make it, if nothing else, to make it a little better, to create a little ease, to create a space of pause, and even work on internalized depression to transform that.
I'm sitting thinking like, how comes I never had a Dharma teacher like her? Do you know what I mean? And that's because all my Dharma teachers were white. So, people are just so lucky now, the people, especially in the US with the plethora of BIPOC teachers coming through, because it's like, wow, you just transformed me on the spot, sister.
I'd say. It is, sometimes having been trained by white Buddhist teachers, sometimes there are some constraints, right? Like I have this other voice that's, no. Don't let your hands go too big. Don't move your body too much. And it's like, no. That's how it's going to come through me.
Exactly.
So recognizing that. And I think that the last thing I want to say is that in terms of internalized depression, if we hold that we all have Buddha nature, we all, it's already here. Then on some level, the things that I see as imperfections, they don't exist. And I think it can create an opening to appreciating, loving oneself, and being compassionate with self and other.
Thank you, Ashe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Amaho.
K-ho in my home.
Arisika, what you brought to the book was the feminine, the energy that we as women and the creativity. Do you want to say something about your chapter?
I want to yield to Rima because I know that you had a hard stop. So if that's possible.
Sure. So what you brought to the book was silence, the whole conversation of silence, which is such an important topic. So just what do you want to say about your chapter?
Sure. And I just want to say I have a hard stop at 2:30 Eastern time, so I have about 15 minutes. But it was a really provocative chapter in that I was exploring how so often we as people of color are silenced. And so we shirk from that word. We're afraid of that word, or we dismiss that word because we associate it with oppression. But what I really wanted to get at is the liberation that's found in silence and a mind that drops from thinking to being and to awareness, and how that very process of clarity and the spaciousness you referred to, Carla, how that practice of spaciousness is so liberating. And so I think the title of the chapter is something like Being Silenced and Claiming Silence, the Practice of Stillness in the Movement for Liberation. And it's really an advocacy, or even you could say an argument for practicing silence in social justice movements or in anti-oppression movements, that if we really claim silence as a practice, it undergirds or grounds our speaking. And so we speak with wisdom and with thoughtfulness. And really, my concern is not even how we address the powers that be as much as how we and our communities interact with each other, and that we as activists cultivate the capacity to treat each other well. And the last thing I'll say is that I do think, especially in more recent grassroots movements like Black Lives Matter, that need for a kind of restorative practice of silence seems to be very apparent. And I'm thinking of Adrienne Marie's Brown's book, We Will Not Cancel Us, and how she points to toxicity within activist communities, and how we just need something more that helps us relate as activists, as people of color, to each other with a kind of kindness. And what I propose is that kindness arises from silence.
Thank you. And as we move on to you, Arisika, and as I'm just reading this land acknowledgement and ancestral honoring, I just want to acknowledge that the reason why we can be here on this screen on our computers is because many of the minerals come from Africa. Okay. So I just really want that when we use our telephone, that telephone, it's filled with many minerals that have been mined from the continent, which is why we have the access. So I just want to acknowledge that as we, just passing on to you, Arisika.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing that up, because some of these minerals come from the Congo. And for some people, the Congo represents the current. I mean, there's been rape and war, I think, ever since patriarchy began. And so the Congo is having such atrocities. And I saw a film on women who are trying to address some of these issues on the continent. And what they said is there's not intervention in these wars because every capitalist, corporation wants these minerals. And if you have a destabilized population, if you have people driven out of their homes, you have a market for cheap labor. And this also ties into something else I want to talk about. One of the African feminists who, one of the African wisdom keepers who I think it's Philomena Steady, does not like the term feminist. But what she says is that, if you're talking about women having autonomy in the political sphere, having autonomy in the business sphere, if you want to talk about women who are valued regardless of their size, and size is not a bad thing, or didn't used to be a bad thing in many African cultures, then she said, African women are the first feminists. And I wanted to say that in spite of the fact that, we often stereotype African women as beasts of burden, we talk about female genital cutting, we talk about all the problems, and yet that continent is a place where, in West Africa, for example, you are, mother is not a term that relegates you to the domestic sphere. Mother is a term that speaks to the rightness of your being able to hold authority outside of the domestic sphere. The Yoruba actually have a term, Iyalode, mother of the outside. It's a title given to the chief priestess. It's a title given, who has spiritual authority. It's a title given to the chief of the market women. It's a title given to the feminine side of rulership. And so in many African cultures, queen is not a lesser term to the issue of the king. And in many West African languages, they're ungendered. So there is one word, the ruler, is how we would translate it in English, rather than kings and queens, with the queen always being beneath the king. So that these issues, this powerful heritage we have as women of African descent, the Moynihan, I'm 72, so I remember when the Moynihan report came out in the mid 60s, saying that the problem with the Black family, the pathology of the Black family, was that it was headed by women. Well, in Africa, in America, in the USA, I'm speaking of the USA because that's what I know best, femininity, the cultural set of attributes assigned to, quote, women, female-bodied people, small, fair, delicate, and dependent. In Africa, strength is a female virtue, at least West Africa. In West Africa, business acumen. Among the Igbo, women have sound business senses. While men may participate in the market, and the Yoruba have been urban for centuries, the women run the marketplace. And in fact, among the Yoruba, the place beyond, it's the realm of the ancestors, go to the celestial marketplace to pick a good head, to pick a good destiny. One of the interesting contradictions is in Buddhism, as I first learned about it, you want to get off the wheel of life. You don't want to be reborn. In Africa, you have great delight in coming back, incarnation after incarnation. So women are central to African life. And among the Yoruba, while sexism is posited as existing at the moment of creation, it is not sanctioned by Supreme Being. Supreme Being actually says anything that men do, if women are not included, it will fail. Unequivocal. So my chapter is about upholding the power of African women and women of the African diaspora. This doesn't mean that every nuclear family in the West is perfect, or every family back in Africa, but these are guiding cultural principles, and we kept them. For a long time, I thought, oh, women are powerful because in slavery, women, men were traded off, they died early. No, our heritage as strong Black African descended people mixed with a million bloodlines. These are our cultural heritage, that we be powerful people who speak our minds, who stand up to power. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I just hope, just listening to this inspiration pouring from all out of you, that hopefully the listeners are going to run out and buy the book. So as we begin to bring this to a close, I just want to tell you that the I had great fun putting all the chapters out on the table like a puzzle and putting them together. I had great fun doing that. And so the different sections that landed was reappropriating the Buddha, Black liberation, decolonizing mindfulness, social justice, a revival of an old religion, and the personal is political. So that's the landscape for those of you thinking what else is in the book. And as we bring this to an end, maybe, and put you on the spot here, is there another chapter in the book that you thought, yeah, that really kind of sparked you? Was there, or it could be, or was there something in the book that wasn't there and you would have liked to have seen? Because I hope that, you know, that there will be other volumes of African wisdom. It doesn't end here, that somebody else will say, okay, I'm going to do the next volume. So the question as we bring this to a close, is there a chapter that really sparked you, or something that you would have liked to have seen? Who would like to pop first?
I think for me, the book was like a journey. It really was like, so when you ask me what really popped, it's sort of like, well, I'd read one, and then I'd read another one, and it would take me someplace else, and it would take me somewhere else. So I can't even identify like one, because it was so much fun to just ride, you know, on the river of this particular book and experience the voices and the wisdom, such wisdom. It's really beautiful, and I thank you so much for Vimalasara for really pulling this together, for having the concept, the idea, and being patient as an editor, and just really inviting me to participate. It really, really, perfection.
Thank you. Thank you too. Okay, next person to pop.
I'll just say very briefly that not so much a chapter, but the whole section on decolonizing Dharma, I think, is so important, such an important contribution, because that term, decolonizing Dharma, or just decolonizing Buddhism, is being floated, but there hasn't been much explicitly written. So I think it's such an important resource, as we hear that phrase in Dharma talks, and we hear it even in, you know, read it in blogs, but we don't have it really fleshed out. So I think that is a huge contribution as we evolve how Buddhism is practiced by people of color, and also how we critique how it has been co-opted and identified in kind of more mainstream middle class white communities. I think that term is gaining traction, but it's new. So this contribution is really welcome.
Thank you. Arisika.
Well, I think I spoke a little bit to that first chapter because I was so blown away by it. And so this issue in which the positionality of Africans in diaspora. Now, we certainly have groups of people who have freely or somewhat freely emigrated to the USA and other parts of the world, the Caribbean, Britain, Europe, you know. But the idea that our position in American society, USA society, is most similar to that of the Dalit, the group known as untouchables in India, is really an important issue. And that's touched upon in that first chapter. And I also think that the way that many teachers of African descent are bringing in those ways that are culturally appropriate to us. The Buddha said, teach in your vernacular, and the vernacular of peoples of African heritage. And I'm not saying, please, I am not saying that all of us sing and dance, but our culture holds a container, creates a container in which we understand the power of these vehicles. And so I think the embodiment, which was touched on by several writers, because Vajrayana really does bring that in. So that issue, those links between embodiment, between healing, between untouchable caste position, those are things that I think I want more of. I mean, when Carla, when you talked about sound, Bernice Reagan talks about the civil rights movement, and she says, we'd be gathered in a church. This is during the civil rights era, struggling for voting rights. And she said, you knew your home could be bombed, you could be thrown off the plantation, the modern day plantation that people lived in the 60s and 70s in the South, sharecropping. And she said, and the police would come in, and everybody would get a little tense. They were taking names. They were seeing who was speaking. They might be planning to kill you the next night. And she said, inevitably, somebody started a song. And by the time, and then somebody else picked up on it. And in those moments, focusing on those moments, the people were free. They were not afraid of the sheriff. They stood their ground, like the Buddha being challenged by Mara. They called on their inner strength. They called on the ancestors. They called on their spirituality, and they gave voice. So for me, how we, as modern day teachers of the Dharma, are bringing our cultural things in. Carla, I remember a workshop you did on feeding your demons at East Bay Meditation Center. And the person you were co-teaching with, I don't remember his name, started us off with a song in the gospel tradition. It brought me home. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, actually, as you were sharing that, Arisika, it took me back into the shebeens. Growing up in the UK, and part of the black culture was in the shebeens, and it wasn't just about clubbing. I mean, before emceeing, I don't know what they call it now, it was toasting. That's what you did, you toasted. And basically they were the black politicians, and they were telling you what would be happening in the streets, toasting over the records. It was just so, I mean, that's what got me into spoken word. And the police would come in and kind of what's up, and of course all the drugs would drop onto the floor. But that same thing of just that community, bringing the community together. So I just want to, I will answer a couple of questions, but I just want to say thank you to you, Carla. Thank you to you, Rima. Thank you, Arisika, for just this delightful conversation. It's quite in the kitchen. I feel like I want to do the podcast in the kitchen, around the kitchen table. But what I do want to say is a bit about the right. Leave when you need to leave. It's okay. So a bit about the writing process. It was beautiful. This thing about Black people's time, I'm telling you, I've edited stuff before, and the majority of people met their deadlines, and that is like gold, because one of the job description of an editor is stalker, and it's a horrible job. When you want the chapter and somebody says they're going to do it and they don't do it, and you have to chase them and they don't answer the emails. And I only had a couple of experiences, and actually it was so interesting. I won't name the person, but it was like just chasing them. They were just so busy, and then lo and behold, we were on a panel together, and that was just, I couldn't believe it. There it was on the panel. I'll give you the phone number, Nate. Oh, we'll take the phone number now. And then the chapter came. So it was a beautiful experience of putting it together. So,
And I want to say, Vimalasara, thanks for your patience. I was one of those people who just couldn't, the pandemic had hit, everything was up. Thank you for your patience. And before I go, I just want to release the ancestors of the land, all our roots, all who will be descended from us, all our root Asian teachings, all our root African/diasporan teachings, and to you, the audience, be in touch with the wisdom and the healing power of your ancestors. They are powers. And if you have difficult ancestors, every one of us has some difficult ancestors who, as Vimalasara said, need to be in quarantine till there's more healing. Every was indigenous to a place. We may be in a different place. Let's always remember the First Nations people of the land we're on. Let's always remember the shoulders we stand on. May we be at peace. May we be blessed. May we be seen and honored. Ashe. Blessings, Vimalasara. Thank you for inviting me to this endeavor.
Yeah. And let's just end it there. So just go out, buy the book, tell people about the book, get it onto the education study list, get your professors to get it on university reading lists, get it into your Buddhist centers, get it into your communities, create a reading group, read the book and share, and let us know what you think. So thank you, over and out. Thank you.